sent us the press release at the same time they sent it to the press. But that is one of the things that I want to see if there was testimony, because we were told over and over and over, oh, this is only an inquiry. You know, we're just asking a few questions. Now, another topic of this was the electronic communications, and you know, Deborah, you've read the report. Charlie Crist, one of the first things that he did was he established a cabinet level position, the Office of Open Government. They took about a year, and you had heard some comments that came out, and you know, they went kind of across the state.
Yes.
And
they took public testimony.
Right, and I know you had talked about it, that it seemed like it came up over and over and over. Was part of it was electronic, you know, using emails, and economic development was always in the center of it.
Well, I spoke to Barbara Peterson, who participated in it, and she said that she was actually in charge of that task force, and she said that that was something they heard a lot of throughout the state, was on the economic development side, was that you had local agencies who would not release public information and who would not hold public meetings. And she's actually very pleased, as I am, pleased with
Right.
the final opinion that the state attorney did finally release to everybody, because he definitively stated that these economic development agencies, at least in the case of Team Santa Rosa, step in the shoes of government and
Right.
perform a public function, and therefore are subject to Sunshine Law.
Right.
And she thinks that there's going to be some ramifications throughout the state from this opinion.
Right.
Because now you have people who can take that opinion, and it's an opinion, but it's an opinion of a state attorney, and they're armed with that. If they have to take these cases to court, they're armed with that opinion, and
Right.
that's going to carry some weight in those cases.
Well, you know, it's interesting in that, and I'm glad, and I will support, just like you said. Putting it in writing was important. You know, the whole purpose of this journey that I went down was to get people to follow the law. There's a couple little, well, one stone thrower in particular that thinks that the whole goal of this was to try to get people put in jail. That wasn't the goal of it. The goal of it was, here's the law. There is a gray area. We need to wash away the gray. It needs to be black and white. Everyone needs to understand their responsibilities to the law. And that was a good part of it. Now, one of the things was included in this was electronic communications. And for example, Commissioner Gordon Gooden and Commissioner Cole had a conversation, and they said, "Well, we're unhappy with the TPO, and this is why I'm unhappy." Now, these are email conversations, ladies and gentlemen, and all conversations, two commissioners can't have a conversation unless it's at a noticed public meeting,
Right.
where minutes are taken.
Right.
There was exchanges back and forth 4 or 5 different times, and then 30 days later, they pulled their support for the TPO.
Right. But there was no decision that was actually arrived at in those emails, though.
It did. There wasn't a decision, but it was discussed, and then it was crystallized 30 days later.
Right. I don't have a real problem with that email, to be honest with you. I mean, people. It was a back and forth kind of a, hey, what do you think about this? It had a conversational tone to it, I thought. The concern with the emails is when you get into, I talked to this person and that person and that person, and here's the consolidated gist of what happened,
Right.
and now let's do this at the next meeting. If you're talking about something like that, that's a different story from just sort of a conversational, hey, this is a dumb committee, why are we on it, which is what those emails were about.
You know, but I will have to, you know, point out to you that the person whom I believe is the subject matter expert statewide, Barbara Peterson looked at that exchange. She's with the First Amendment
Yes.
Foundation, and she said, if of course the jury would have to decide,
Right.
but in her eyes, it was a violation of the Sunshine Law. Now I'm going to read to you what was in the report, ladies and gentlemen. While these emails are troubling, they do not rise to the level of a violation of the Sunshine Law. While there is an exchange of emails between Cole and Gooden, they do not truly contain an exchange of ideas as contemplated by the Florida Sunshine Law. Now I'm just going to say it flat out. That's the opinion of this investigator that looked at this, and everybody's got an opinion.
Right.
Barbara Peterson's opinion was vastly different, and now along with that, the state attorney's office made recommendations. Ladies and gentlemen, one thing that you see throughout this report is, yes, they did what you alleged that they did. They did violate the law, but then you also see, but they didn't do it on purpose.
Right.
You know, that's a common theme through all this. But they made some recommendations.
Ignorance of the law.
Well, I'll say it again, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, for goodness sakes, if the city cops pull you over, if the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Department pull you over, or if you wind up down at the state's attorney's office for something a little more troubling that you might have got involved in, just tell Mr. Edens or Mr. Marcille or Mr. Brook that, you know, well, I did it, but I didn't mean to. You know, it should give you a free pass. I mean,
So you didn't know it was illegal.
unless there's a difference between elected and powerful appointed people than citizens. I
Right.
don't know. Maybe there's a difference in how the law is laid out.
It's possible.
You think? If you're not noting the sarcasm, ladies and gentlemen, you need to rub your eyes and pay attention.
It's the privileges of rank. You get a crown and an ermine robe to go with that as well.
Well, you know, let me say this about justice, and I believe that, as we all know, Madam Justice, she has blindfold on, and it's supposed to balance out for everyone.
Yes.
And I think we've all seen cases, many well-documented cases, where minority folks in this country didn't get a fair shake.
Right.
But what I see developing now is, if you're elected or you're appointed to a high position, unless somebody drops off a videotape of you committing the felony crime to the state attorney's office, apparently all you have to do is say, I didn't mean to, and you're off. There seems to be a real difference. I can tell you that this current state attorney's office seems to go pretty hard after your normal run-of-the-mill citizens, and they don't get a second chance.
Well, if you're talking about drug dealers and murderers and people who aren't
I think there's
a
probably
part of the upper tier.
yeah, and like the upper tier people never mess with drugs or never drink while they're driving and all that. You see,
Should we call them the creme de la creme?
well, you know what? I am okay with somebody getting a second chance. I believe that. Sometimes people make mistakes in their lives, and they are truly remorseful of that, and I think we ought to give a second chance. But we shouldn't be handing out second chances just because of your social status in the community in which you live.
And here's my response to that. Is that a constant throughout time and place? That's always going to happen. That the influential and the powerful always have that advantage. And you'll notice when people made a concerted effort, even on this case, something was done. So if you have the mob and you have the pitchforks and you have the torches,
right,
you're going to get a response, but you have to have the mob. If you don't have the mob, it's
well,
going to get swept under the carpet.
I mean,
People have to pay attention.
It goes